Well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to today's webinar. Again, my name is Alex. I'm the Customer Support Director at Aplos. So I get the privilege now and then of doing these webinars and kind of walking people through some different content of the software. This is going to be specifically focused on how to use the 990EZ e-file tool that Aplos has built and offers. So if you are not already an Aplos customer, some of this may seem a little unfamiliar, but for the most part, I will assume that everyone here has an Aplos account, and we'll go through and take a look at what this looks like in your account. A couple of housekeeping things. This webinar is being recorded, so afterwards, once we're all finished, I'm going to publish this onto our support article, so that way if you ever want to go watch it again or want to share it with someone else, it'll be there as the resource. And then if you have any questions as we go, feel free to just type those into that question field, and I will do my best to cover everything once we're finished here today. Alrighty, so we're talking about the 990EZ today. So if you are in your Aplos account, to find our e-file tools, you would up here click on Fund Accounting and then hover over e-file, and you have three different options here. One is Start a New Filing, one is In Progress, and one is History. So if I click on Start a New Filing here, what it's going to do is take me to this kind of launching page, and we offer two e-file processes. One for the 990N or the e-postcard, which we're going to be doing a webinar on later this week, and then one for the 990EZ. There is a third version of the 990 called the full form 990 or just form 990. We do not have an e-file path for that. However, we do have a feature in Aplos called 990 tags, which can help you populate the statement of activities and the statement of functional or the statement of position for that report, but not an actual e-file type flow, which we're going to be looking at here today. So today we're going to focus on the 990EZ. Now the years that we have available for this are the 2017, 18, and 19 tax years. So today we're going to be looking at 19. And the eligibility here, the difference between the two forms is you will file the 990N or e-postcard if your organization has $50,000 or less in gross revenue, gross receipts, total income, whatever you want to call it. If your total revenue, not net, but total revenue or gross receipts is under 50,000, then you would file the 990N. If you have between 50,000 and 200,000 in gross receipts or total income, you would file this 990EZ. The other parameter here is if your revenue is not within that zone, but you do have over $500,000 of assets, then you would still file the form 990EZ as well. So what that would mean is, maybe you only made 48,000 in total income, but you have an organization that specializes or focuses on owning, property, and so you've got, 5 or 10, properties, and the value of those is in hundreds of thousands, if not, over that. So if that exceeds 500, you would need to file the 990EZ. Anything over the 200 mark here would go into the full form 990, which again, we don't have. So today we're going to focus on the 990EZ. So if I were to click this button, it's going to start a new filing, but I actually already have one in progress. So I'm going to go up to this tab up here and go to In Progress. And I can pick up from where I was working on this form right here. So I'm going to hit Continue. Now what we've done here is the 990EZ is a multiple page form that asks a series of questions. It's an informational return. So it's basically asking, how much did you make? How much money do you have? Did you make or spend money in these types of ways? Tell us about your officers, about your entity, and then a lot of qualifying things. So you fill out that form, but then that form also triggers these additional things called schedules. And so if you were to answer yes or over a certain threshold or meet some other criteria, it might say, okay, well, if you responded here in this way, then you also have to fill out Schedule A or B or G or O or one of these other things. The number one reason why the 990EZ gets returned or rejected by the IRS is due to incomplete information from the schedules. So typically the form itself usually doesn't have, this depends on the filer, but usually that form is not usually the problem. It's what then that form triggers and the additional schedules that you have to complete. So what we did is we basically built kind of a walkthrough step-by-step process here, which is what we're going to look at. asking you all of the relevant questions to populate the 990EZ, but also it automatically triggers those additional schedules that you need to complete as well. So if you were to use this from start to finish and answer everything to the best of your ability, it should fill out all the applicable fields, trigger all of the applicable schedules, force you to complete those schedules before filing, and then you can choose to either e-file directly with the IRS, because we are IRS e-file providers for this form, or you can choose to print and mail it and send it in on your own. So just to put your mind at ease there, we are helping you kind of put in the right fields, do the math, so on and so forth. So so long as you have the information in front of you, it should be relatively easy to get going. Now, before you start this, what I would recommend is to go into your Applis account or whatever your accounting system is and pull a few reports, one of which would be a balance sheet as of the beginning of the year that you're filing for, a balance sheet as of the end of the year that you're filing for, and the income statement for the date range of this year. So for this example, I'm going to be doing a 2019 return. So what I would do is I'd go and actually run a balance sheet for the day before this. So I'd go run a balance sheet for 12/31/18 and a balance sheet for 12/31/19. And then I'm going to run an income statement for January 1st through December 31st of 19. That will essentially help you figure out, or at least have the information present there for the financial information it's going to ask for. And then if you have any filing documents or any organizational things, you might want to have those just handy, because there might be some questions you need to know there. Once you have that, then you're ready to get started. So first part here, the step one is going to be organization info. So this is where you would enter your EIN or your tax ID number. So I put in just kind of a dummy number here, and then you're going to pick what fiscal year you're filing for. So mine is January 1st. Now the due date for the 990 is typically the 15th day of the 5th month of your fiscal year. 15th day of the 5th month of your fiscal year. So if I have a fiscal year starting in January, my due date for the 990 would be May 15th. So it's not the same as personal taxes, not the same as corporate taxes. It's different. It's specifically the 15th day of the 5th month of your fiscal year. If you had, a different fiscal year, if it was, October, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you would be the 15th day of February, which would be your 5th month in that fiscal year. So just to keep things easy, I'm going to keep it as January 1st here. So my due date is May 15th. And then now I'm picking what fiscal year I'm filing for. So this is going to be my 2019 year. Okay. Save and continue. And by the way, when you hit save and continue, it does save your progress. So like I'm doing now, you can always come back in and continue to edit this form. Next step is the organization info. So here I'm going to put in my organization's address. So I've got that listed there, telephone number, website, whatever it asks for. The only requirements there are the asterisk fields. It's also going to ask for any additional information. So these are kind of unique cases. So if none of these apply, just leave it blank, but you can read through those and see if any of them apply. You can put in your state filing information, whichever copy or whichever state that a copy of this needs to be filed with. And then the bookkeeper information, again, is just kind of informational. So whatever it asks for there, put in the applicable name and contact information like so. Then you have your type of organization. So here's what you're going to pick. You pick either 501c blank, so whatever C organization you are, or if you're one of these forms here, you'd fill that out. So you'd pick that. And then you're going to pick what form of organization you are. Are you a trust, an association, a corporation, or other? And then what accounting basis do you use? Are you pulling your reports and recording things on an accrual or cash basis, or some sort of other entities requirements here? Then you have your list of officers. So you just add the list of people here of officers, directors, trustees, and key employees. Just add their information there. If you need to add another one, click the plus button there. It's going to add up a new drop down there. So you can add as many as you need. If you don't need that many fields, you can get rid of them there. So I've just got myself there. And then I would say save and continue. And now you're into the financial bit. So here's where those financial statements come into play. So if I were to have my 12/31/18, so as of the beginning of this fiscal year's balance sheet, this is where I'm going to put in those figures there. So just on my kind of test numbers here, I'm saying that I started the year with $100,000 in cash savings and investments, a $250,000 building, $1,000 of other assets. And then when I answered that, if I get rid of this, I'll show you what this looks like. So if I had not put in other assets, it's not going to ask me for anything. But as soon as I put this in, it's now opening up this drawer here saying, please describe, and it's going to add it to what's called Schedule O. And it's one of those schedules that is triggered by certain information. Schedule O is kind of the addendum. It's like the additional information schedule. So this is more populated as you go than it is something you actually have to take action on later, which we'll look at. So I describe it there. So then what it's going to do is it's going to total, okay, so you started the year with 351, and then you ended the year with 426, and now it's going to factor in my liabilities. So let's say I had a mortgage loan here for 150. I've paid down 25 on it. So there's my decrease there. So that's my current, end of year balance there. So what it's doing is it's basically saying, okay, your net assets, or your assets up here, minus your liabilities equals your equity. And there's been a change in equity essentially from 201,000 from the beginning of the year to 301,000 at the end of the year. So once that's entered, what it does is now takes you to the income statement, which is now going to be where you explain now how that difference occurred. So this is where the income statement comes into play. Now, chances are you do not have your income statement or your chart of accounts designed in a way where it's factoring in or categorizing things based on what they're asking here. So what you'll likely need to do is go through your income statement and basically kind of categorize it into these buckets yourself. So if you have 4 or 5 accounts that you use to track this type of thing, you would sum those together and put the total right there. We also do have an income statement worksheet that you can download here too. It's in Excel. So if you open this guy up, it'll help you kind of walk through how to categorize those things from your income statement into the boxes that it applies to. So there's a couple of different sheets there. So I went through here and just put in some numbers. So I've got $300,000 worth of contributions. I've got $200 worth of investment income. So if these other things apply, you can click to expand to them. So if you did sell assets other than inventory, you can click that. It's going to ask some more questions. If you had gaming or fundraising events, you'd click that. It's going to ask some more questions there. Notice that if you were to enter something here, it would attach Schedule G, which we'll look at these schedules here in a little bit. But that's one of those trigger points. If you were to enter the information there, it would automatically pop up that schedule. And then sale of inventory, if it's there, I did put in some sale of inventory just to show you what that looks like. So it asked me these additional questions. I put in, here's my gross sales, here's my cost of goods sold. So here's kind of my net, profit from that activity. And then any other revenue in Schedule O. So I put in $1,000. It then asked me, what is the other revenue that you're referring to? So I just put in the description of teaching. I'm going to put speaking and teaching fees. And then I get to the expenses. So now it's asking me for how did I spend my money? So did I have any grants or similar amounts paid? And I'd put an amount, and then it's going to ask me to describe that in Schedule O. Any benefits paid to or for members, any salaries or compensation, I put my amount there. Professional fees, occupancy, rent, printing, publication, and then other. Now, what I've noticed by helping a lot of entities here is usually these, 6 buckets here are pretty specific into what they're asking for. And then there's a lot of what you're probably doing that is going to be considered other expenses. So I put in an amount here for 5,000, and other expenses could be things like travel, entertainment, office supplies, basically anything that doesn't fit one of these above categories here. No worries about, oh man, do I have to call it, utilities or maintenance? Is it maintenance if I'm maintaining my office and buying supplies? Like, no, if it doesn't clearly fit in one of these categories, then drop it into Schedule O here in other expenses, and then just describe it here. And so what this is doing is it's saying, okay, well, you had $301,000 and $700 of income, $201,700 worth of expenses. That leads to a net income of $100,000, which does help explain the difference between what your assets were at the beginning of the year and what they are at the end. Now, if I had changed one of these amounts, if I put 10,000, then what it's going to do is say, hey, you told me that you were starting with 201 and you ended with 301, but the way that we're calculating this is only leading up to a difference of 95. So what's going on here? Now, there could be reasons for this. Not everything makes it into your income statement, right? So if you did have anything there, there's this other thing here called other changes in net assets or fund balances not common. So if I did have a difference there, then I'd say I need a difference of 5,000, and then I would include the details of that there. So receipt of accounts receivable, something like that, just to somehow explain there's been a change in my balance sheet figures that is not captured in my income statement. So why is that? it's due to this. Where you can find some of that stuff in Aplos is if you're looking at the income statement by fund, where each fund is a column. Then at the bottom, it shows here's your beginning fund balance, here's your net income, here's your other fund balance movements, and then your ending fund balance as of the end of the period. So some of that other fund balance movements could be shored up here, to where if you had payment of, if you had reduction of liabilities, that is cash that you've paid for a liability that you've already accrued, so that would not be an expense. So that would explain some of that difference there. Same with the receiving accounts receivable. The income was counted in the last fiscal year, but now someone just owes me money and I finally got that money this year. So that would not be new income. That's just simply a reduction of accounts receivable. So that kind of thing would be where you plug in this additional field here. And then once the math works, notice if the math doesn't work, if I were to just leave this as 0, then it's going to say something's not right. It's not going to let you file because it's saying, hey, the math is not working. So the math has to work in order for this to let you kind of continue on without warning you. So my math works, hit save and continue. Now notice, just from organization info and plugging in your financials, we're already on step 3. So it goes pretty quick. Here in step 3, it's going to ask for some other information. So program services, this is asking what is the organization's primary exempt purpose? So the reason why you are tax exempt, why is that? What do you do that is the reason why you are tax exempt, or the type of entity that you are? So you put that in. I just put ours here. We are not a nonprofit, but I'm just using us as an example. So I'd put in a description there. And then down here, it would ask, describe the organization's program service accomplishments for each of its largest 3 program services measured by expenses and blah, blah, blah. So read through that. This is where you can put in, here's kind of the top 3 things that we do. Here's why we exist. And then we exist for these purposes. So we do these 3 things. So I worked with an entity that does human trafficking prevention, right? So they basically focus on education and information, and then they also work with other entities and kind of collaborating there. So there's kind of multiple functions that they provide. So they would describe each one of those there, and then provide a list of, here's how much we spent overall on this certain thing, how much of those expenses were grants, did they include foreign grants, so on and so forth. And then if you have any other program services, describe them below. So here's your top 3, and then anything else, describe here. Save and continue. So then you get to other info. Now, most of these are yes and no questions. A lot of the wording here, is going to be very specific to certain things. So we'll go through a couple of examples here. Did the organization engage in any significant activity not previously reported to the IRS? So did you? No or yes or no? No, leave it no. Yes, you put that in, and it might ask you to describe what it is. Other things might ask you to fill out some more fields. So like, did the organization have unrelated business gross income of 1,000 or more from business activities like gaming and gross sale of inventory, that kind of stuff? You click yes, and then it's going to have you describe that there. And then it's also going to ask, have you filed any other particular form? So again, you would go through here and just read the questions here, see if it applies. Most entities that I've worked with, pretty much all of this is no. But again, that's not me saying that it's going to be no. It just kind of depends on who you are and what you guys do. So be sure to read through them, answer them applicably, and then if there are any additional schedules, then they will be triggered for you automatically. Sometimes you'll notice there's a couple of different forms, schedules, and options that we do not accommodate, one of which is the Aplos Schedule C. So if you do meet the criteria for Schedule C, we will not be able to complete the form for you electronically. However, what you can do is continue to move forward and then print the form, all of the easy forms, and do Schedule C by hand, essentially. So that's what we typically recommend. If there is something that is preventing you from e-filing a schedule or an option that you need to complete, then we would still suggest going through this and do it to the best of your ability, because it's still going to populate the entire EZ and the other schedules that you need. And then you might just need to do one of those forms by hand and then mail everything in together. So Schedule C is one of those listed. Once you go through all of this, click Save and Continue. And then you get to these other 2 buckets here, highest compensated employees and highest compensated contractors. So this is only a table for the organization's 5 highest compensated employees or contractors. that who have received over $100,000 of compensation from the org. So if no one has gone over $100,000 of compensation, then this would be left blank. Same with the contractors. Any contractor that you've paid more than 100,000, enter it here. If not, leave it blank. And once we're past step 3, that concludes basically the entire 990 Easy form. So it's a pretty quick form. It's not too much information. Again, just kind of depending on if you have that financial information available, kind of dictates the speed in which you can move through this. But if you've got everything and can plug that in fairly quickly, it should only take, somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes maybe as an average. And then you get into the schedules. So based on the way that I answered those questions earlier, it has said I definitely need to schedule or need to fill out Schedule A. And then the way that I answered Schedule A triggered Schedule B. And Schedule B is one of those optional things. So it's asking, have you received a contribution of greater than $5,000 from any one contributor? If so, do Schedule B. If not, click no, and then you don't have to do Schedule B. So I would do something like that, and then now Schedule B is gone. But let's just click yes and save. So real quick, I'll just take you through these two schedules. So Schedule A, again, it's not going to let you file completely unless you've done all of the information here from the schedules. So I would click on Schedule A. It's now going to ask me the data needed for Schedule A. So if I was a school, I'd click this, and it's going to say complete Schedule E. And now if I save and continue, now Schedule E is triggered. So now I can go into Schedule E and fill out all of that forms. Otherwise, I'm going to pick, there's certain parts here. So there's part 2 and part 3, only some of which is applicable. So if I picked this option, it would say, okay, complete part 3. I'm going to pick part 2 here. And then there is an additional schedule or option here, which is 12, which is not one that we have available. So if your organization organized and operated exclusively for the benefit or to perform the functions of or the purposes of one of these things, then that would be one of those options where we'd still recommend doing this to the best of your ability. Do everything else. It's just now you have to attach Schedule A completed by hand. So I'm going to click Save and Continue. So I'm going to go to part 2. And then part 2 specifically just asks for a lot of comparative information. So a lot of these same kind of buckets that you would have entered over in the financial section, it's asking for that, but now over the last 5 fiscal years. So as needed, you would fill in that information and then complete it to the best of your ability. Again, just kind of depends on what you trigger here. Save and continue. Oops. Let's do this one. Okay, and now Schedule B. Schedule B, again, is that list of contributors. So it's asking if anybody has donated over $5,000 to the organization during the tax year, you would add however many members that applies to. And then on the next page, see if it yells at me. Yep, on the next page, it's non-cash property. So if that person had provided something that was non-cash of over that value, then you can enter that information here. Again, this is just mainly an informational return. So it's just asking to populate that data. Okay. So that's where you'd have all the schedules. So again, steps 1 through 3 is filling out the Easy itself. Step 4 rather is filling out all of the schedules. Once everything is done, you can hit Save and Continue, and it's going to bring you to asking, so who is the preparer? So enter the preparer's information, whether or not they're self-employed. If they are a paid preparer, they've got some more data here to enter. And then the officer that authorizes this information to be submitted to the IRS, so you'd put in their information there. And then you're on step 6. Now, the pricing of these forms is free so long as you have an Aplos subscription. So if you have an active Aplos subscription, this should be free. And so you can just click Save and Continue. And then it's going to bring you to this review page. So this is where you can begin to look at the actual forms themselves. So you can review. So I'm going to click on the Easy here. This now is my 990 Easy form. So I'd go through here if you want to double check kind of if it's put stuff in the right spot. If all the math is there, I mean, everything should be working just fine. But if you wanted to review that form, you can. Same with all the schedules. I can say generate Schedule A. So here is now Schedule A, how I filled it out. Again, I didn't really put anything in there, but it would have all that data entered there. So if you wanted to review those forms prior to submitting, then you can. You can also update your return, which is basically just putting you back into one of these steps. Once everything is done, you verified it, you feel comfortable submitting, then you can say mark my return as complete. And then it's going to take you to this page, which is you need to upload a signature file. in order to authorize the electronic submission. That's if you want to e-file with the IRS, or what you can do is you can choose to mail. So what that would basically do is you would have the mailing instructions here. You can download all the forms into PDF and then print, and then you just mark this as, I will mail my return to the IRS. That will basically consider it completed on the Applos side and move it into the history tab over here. And then you can print those forms, you can save them for your records, mail it into the IRS, and go from there. If you are doing option 1 here, then when you download this form, it's going to download a PDF here, of which you'll have to sign, print, sign, and then scan. And then one kind of goofy thing here is it downloads into the PDF format, but in order to upload it, it has to be a JPEG, GIF, or PNG file. So what I would do here is, let's just go ahead and open this up. So I'm going to open this up here. So here's my form. I would print this, scan it up. And then if I needed to save this into a different format, I'm using a Mac and I'm using specifically the Preview application. But most of these will allow you to go to File, Save As, or in Preview, it's Export. So I'm going to say Export. And then when I save the new file, I can change the format to be whatever I need it to be. So again, GIF, PNG, or JPEG here. So I'm going to pick JPEG and just call this, the signed version into my downloads folder. Click Save. So now when I go back to this file, I can choose my file into my downloads folder. Here's my signed option. And I can upload that file there. Once it's uploaded, then it's going to show you that form there. This is basically just, again, uploading it so that when we submit the information to the IRS, it automatically detects that you have authorized that e-file action. And then once that's uploaded, now you can click e-file my return with the IRS, which I will not click in case we need to go back to one of these things and talk about it. So that is basically how to do the 990EZ in Applos. Again, if you ever need to save and come back to this, you can go back to the start. You can always start a new filing. You can go back to the in progress section and pick up where you left off with a return. And then when you go into the history, then that'll show you your, it'll show you the in progress ones, but any ones that have been submitted. If you do submit electronically and it's been rejected by the IRS, you should know that within the first maybe 5 to 15 minutes, depending on the submission schedule. One thing I do want to mention is when you submit it, if you have added any other emails, basically what it's going to do is the administrator for the account is going to be notified whether or not it was accepted or needs to be worked on. If it needs to be worked on, we're going to send you an email to the administrator that says your form was rejected. Here is what the IRS said you need to fix. So then you'd go in there, fix it, submit it again, and start the process over again. You could submit it as many times as you want until it gets accepted, pending you make the changes that they ask for. But I also do want to mention too that email goes to the administrator. So if you have a user on the account that's doing the filing, and then they submit the filing, and then they're expecting to get the email back to them, the one that completed the form, it will not do that. It's going to go to the administrator or whoever has the communications setting in the Applos account. But if you have any questions as to the status of your filing, anything like that, or if you get the email back that says you need to take action and the language is confusing, then our support is free and we're more than happy to help with that. So just contact us. We'd be happy to help, but just make sure to keep an eye on it and keep checking on it. You can always come back into the history section here or the in progress, and it'll tell you whether or not it's been accepted or if it needs more work. So if you have any questions, just pop back in, again, 5 or 15 minutes later, and you can pick up where you left off. Okay, and that is the 990EZ. So what I'd like to do now is open it up for some questions. So I'm going to just mute myself for a minute or two here and see what questions come through. Otherwise, if we're good, we will move right along. Okay, mute myself for just a minute. Okay, we have a couple questions here. First one is there no e-sign available? That is right. We do not have the ability to e-sign. What you'd have to do is continue working on the return. You do have to print that file over here, that review file, the signature page. You will have to print that, wet sign it, upload it, you scan it, take a picture of it, send it to yourself, and then upload it through your computer in one of those file formats, PNG, JPEG, or GIF. Judy asked, if you mail in the form, how do you know if the IRS accepted? They will mail you back. So they will communicate with you via mail, and you'll get a correspondence from them basically saying, here is what you need to work on, where it was rejected or it was been accepted. I would highly recommend being the squeaky wheel with the IRS. Now, before I go any further, I do want to just be sensitive to the time we're in. The IRS has plenty to do right now with extended tax filings and all of the kind of pandemic related things. So this is all me saying, without any further information, be the squeaky wheel, call them, ask them, because if they've accepted it, or if they've gotten it and given feedback and you haven't heard from them, then I would just choose to be the squeaky wheel with that. Because if they somehow had the wrong address, mailed correspondence back, you didn't get it, like it's kind of up to you to file that form. So I would be the squeaky wheel. I would pester them and make sure that everything is done correctly, so that way that you don't get slapped with any sort of fines or penalties of delayed filings without you knowing it. So also, I'm at step 3 and want to stop and finish later. Do I have to just exit back to the dashboard, and will it save what I've input so far? If you are on a page here, if you were to navigate away, it will not save your changes. So I do recommend clicking either save and go back or save and continue to just move to the next page or the previous page. And once you do that, then you're good. Then you can navigate back, and you can always come back to the in progress section and pick up where you left off. Okay, a couple other questions. You're getting the message. It appears you have some errors. So there might be an incomplete field or something that it's asking for there, Kurt, but you should be able to exit and come back. So depending on when you last did that, it might not save your current progress, but you will always be able to come back to it. So it's possible if you're mid entering a field, you might have to come back to that later, but it should allow you to navigate away. And then Judy, if you don't have a scanner, how can you upload? It's a good question. I know that we're in kind of a weird time and might not have access to the machines we typically do. What I would do in your case is probably take a picture of it on my phone as best as you can, try to angle it so it's just the paper and not whatever's in the background, And then once it's on your phone, you can email it or AirDrop it to your computer, email it to yourself. And then once you've got it in your email, then you can download it and upload it from there. Kind of clunky, but that is how I would go about doing that. Okay, I don't see any other questions. So what we'll do is just call it a day for right now. Again, this webinar was being recorded, so it will be available on our resources page once we can get the video uploaded. If you were to actually go to our support center now and type in the 990EZ, 990EZ, there is a live webinar on how to file the 990EZ with the IRS. However, this video, as you can tell by the user interface, is super old. So today was the first in an attempt to update this. So what we're going to do is actually replace this video with today's webinar. So if you go here before we do the swap, then you're going to see the old version. Now, mind you, the step-by-step is almost exactly identical. It's just the user interface has changed, as has the pricing. So just keep that in mind. But otherwise, you should be able to see the updated version here pretty soon. So thank you guys for showing up today. I appreciate you taking the time, and hopefully this content was helpful. If you have any other questions or need help with this form or anything else Apples related, feel free to give us a call or Slack us, or send us a message over email or intercom. We're happy to help. Our support is free, and we are around even amidst the season of the world right now. So more than happy to help. Thanks, take care, and we'll see you soon.